Welcome one and all to the ancient journey. On today's journey, the Snowden murders at Horseshoe Lake. But before we get started, don't forget, if you enjoy the video, please give us a like and a share. And if you're into our content, please check out the rest of the channel and subscribe. It helps grow the channel and it keeps us producing these videos. To start this story, we need to go back and tell a much older story. In fact, it's an old Cherokee legend about a boy and a rattlesnake. The legend goes that a little boy was walking down a path and he came across a rattlesnake. The rattlesnake was getting old. He asked, "Please, little boy, can you take me to the top of the mountain? I hope to see the sunset one last time before I die." The little boy answered, "No, Mr. Rattlesnake, if I pick you up, you'll bite me and I'll die." The rattlesnake said, "No, I promise, I won't bite you. Just please take me up to the mountain." The little boy thought about it and finally picked up that rattlesnake, took it close to his chest, and carried it up to the top of the mountain. They sat there and watched the sunset together. It was so beautiful. Then after the sunset, the rattlesnake turned to the little boy and asked, "Can I go home now? I'm tired and I'm old." The little boy picked up the rattlesnake and again took it to his chest and held it tightly and safely. He came all the way down the mountain holding the snake carefully and took it to his home to give him some food and a place to sleep. The next day, the rattlesnake turned to the boy and asked, "Please, little boy, will you take me back to my home now? It is time for me to leave this world, and I would like to be at my home now." The little boy felt he had been safe all this time, and the snake had kept his word, so he would take it home as he was asked. He carefully picked up the snake, took it close to his chest, and carried him back to the woods to his home to die. Just before he laid the rattlesnake down, the rattlesnake turned and bit him in the chest. The little boy cried out, and he threw the snake on the ground. "Mr. Snake, why did you do that? Now I will surely die." The rattlesnake looked up at him and grinned and said, "You knew what I was when you picked me up." The Snowden family are well known in the tight-knit community of Horseshoe Lake, Arkansas. Their historic large mansion, called the Snowden House, stands tall and white in the Arkansas sun, its tall columns lining the entry to the home. Built in 1919, the Snowden House is the oldest home on Horseshoe Lake. It is a stunning colonial home, and you would expect to find it on the shores of the Mississippi River during the antebellum times of large plantations of the South. In September of 1996, Sally Snowden McKay and a relative, Memphis blues guitarist Joseph Lee Baker, were found shot to death in the Snowden home. Travis Lewis had been living in a rental property with his parents on Horseshoe Lake. The rental was owned by the Snowden family as well. Prosecutors argued that Lewis was in the process of robbing the mansion when McKay and Baker interrupted him. Lewis then shot them both to death in the ensuing confrontation. Lewis had a juvenile record, including an assault conviction at the age of 17. Travis Lewis was convicted for the murders of Sally Snowden McKay and her cousin, Joseph Lee Baker. While Lewis pled guilty to the murders, he never confessed to the crime, always insisting that another man was the killer of McKay and Baker. Lewis was sentenced to 28 years in prison, and by law, he was required to serve at least 70% of his sentence. Sally's daughter, Martha McKay, bought the mansion from the rest of the Snowden family, and her intention was to renovate the property to its former glory. She eventually was able to turn the neglected property into a bed and breakfast and event center for guests. With elegant decorations and glorious scenery, the mansion became a favorite for weddings, even earning glowing reviews in Southern Bride magazine. In addition to having quite an eye for decorating, Martha was also a practicing Buddhist, and to the shock of much of the Snowden family members, she felt sorrow and pity for her mother's murderer, Travis Lewis. Martha often wrote letters to Lewis in jail and accepted his statement that someone else had murdered her relatives. Martha had been warned by friends as well that contact with Travis was not a good idea. But Martha moved ahead, going as far as visiting Travis in prison. Martha even went further than letters and visits. During his time in prison, Martha was an advocate for his parole and his early release. Family members were contacted every time Travis came up for parole, and Martha was the only family member who would give her consent for him to be paroled. In 2018, Martha got her wish. Travis Lewis, the murderer of Sally McKay and Joseph Baker, was paroled. Martha McKay hired Travis's mother to work as a housekeeper at the Snowden house and hired Travis to do odd jobs around the property. Sometime before March of 2020, Martha's diary recorded that she had sold a chandelier for $10,000, the cash from which she had hidden away in the Snowden house. According to Martha's sister, Katie Hutton, Travis was present the day the chandelier was sold, and the money was hidden. Soon after, the money vanished, and shortly after that, Martha fired Travis. Apparently, her forgiveness could only go so far. On March 25, 2020, the Snowden house, that stately Delta mansion, stood witness to yet more murder. Deputies responded to an alarm in the house. The two officers who arrived found a back door open and went about clearing the house. A suspect in the home leapt from an upstairs window and darted across the yard into a vehicle where he tried to flee. But the Snowden property wasn't about to let this suspect get away so easily. The car becomes stuck in the slippery Delta mud, forcing the suspect to jump from the car and run to the lake's edge. The suspect was observed jumping into the lake, never to be seen again. The body of a female, Martha McKay, was found inside the home. She had been stabbed to death, and next to her body was the murder weapon, along with a bag of valuable items. The police later retrieved the body of the suspect, who had drowned, from the lake. The suspect's name was Travis Lewis. The historic home had now witnessed the murders of a mother and daughter, as well as the death of their killer. Martha, despite her best intentions, had brought a rattlesnake to the Snowden house. Thanks for watching, and thanks for sharing the journey.